see Frankie? Oh, he's ready too. Woo!
Beautiful time of the year, Jason. Beautiful time of the year.
Yes, it is. It is 9 o'clock. Normally we have Niners at 9, but it's NBA opening night. Kings open in 2 days. We have our Sactown Sports Kings insider, Frankie Cartoscelli.
We bring the boom. That's what we do.
So is it Costco guys this year? I mean, I haven't gotten – I get a nickname every season or every half a season. Are we going with the Costco guys because they're Italian and from New York? Or
I'm calling you Frankie.
Well, thanks, Jason. You're the only
I have
one
always called you Frankie. I don't have any other nickname. Maybe Frankie the Yankee is what I call you.
You know what? I apologize. Apparently, he's not going to bring the boom today. So.
Oh, okay. Well, I appreciate you, Jason. I think you're the only person at the station that calls me by my name. So that's actually
nice. Are we doing 30 minutes on the Yankees, or do we have to talk Kings?
I would love to. I was on a podcast with our pal Matt George and with Chris Watkins yesterday, and a good portion of it was them kind of just grilling me for my Yankee fandom, which I'm sure you get on a regular basis as well. But hey, man, I mean, 15 years is a long time, so I'm going to relish in it a little bit. I know that you are too.
Absolutely. And how do you feel as a Yankee fan? I don't really care if others are rooting for other. I feel like, though, people hate the Dodgers and hate the Yankees, right? You like the Yankees. I like the Yankees. So we're obviously rooting for them. But you have a lot of America that wants both teams to lose.
Yeah, it's an interesting take, and it's kind of, I mean, again, we're coming at it from a biased perspective, but I think this is kind of what you want, even, from a Kings perspective. I mean, a lot of us have watched the NBA. Well, a lot of us have watched the NBA playoffs for the last, before 2022, 2023. Kings fans had to watch the playoffs without the Kings in it for, almost 20 years. And I think at that point, I was at the perspective where I want to watch the best two teams go at it. And we saw that with the Cavs and Warriors go at it. Now, at a certain point, that got kind of worn down, and especially with the addition of Kevin Durant and kind of seeing the Warriors take the clear upper hand. But this hasn't happened in over 40 years, where the Yankees and Dodgers specifically. But, last year was kind of a one-off as far as the Rangers and the D-backs, the small market kind of teams, which is cool to see, don't get me wrong. But how the world works and how viewership happens and how those things take place. And we're going to see some real records broken, I think, as far as World Series viewership. And you have the best two players in the league going at it. So aside from my Yankee fandom, which of course, and two Yankee fans talking here on a Northern California radio station, I'm sure people are saying shut up, but I'm excited to see the best two teams go at it and the two best talents in baseball go at it. It's good for the game.
Yeah, I think the NBA comp too. You brought up the Warriors and Cavs having like 4 years in a row, but I also go back to the one that's happened the most in the history of the league was Lakers Celtics, and when we got it again, it was good. Now, Kings fans didn't want to see the Lakers win, and maybe they didn't care about the Celtics either. But just sports fans and basketball fans, when they met a couple times again past the 80s and just, a few years back, those were good finals. And so I hope we just have a really good World Series. And obviously I want the Yankees to be holding the trophy, but I think we got a shot at that. And I think that's what's going to make it great for baseball.
Yeah, I share the same sentiment, Jason. And it's kind of just like, it's hard to predict. One team has no starting pitching. The Dodgers are really kind of on fumes in that end, but the best offense in baseball. They're leading the postseason in runs per game right now, 6.5 per game. The Yankees pitching and bullpens really held up really well. So it's a crapshoot, but like I said, it's good for the game of baseball, which is most important. If you're a baseball fan and you think this is a bad thing, I think you should reevaluate. I think this is good for the game of baseball and just kind of growing how those that kind of are on the fence or haven't wanted to view baseball or become fans before, maybe they'll change their mind after watching this.
All right. One last thing on this, because we do have you on to talk Kings. What's your perfect script of how this World Series would end for you?
My perfect script would be a 4-0 sweep, because the stress of the ALCS was completely just horrible. It's so fun to watch those games.
4-1.
When it's not your your team in it, it's fun, but it's really, we were texting on the side, but I think we're a perfect script just for, I think this thing going 6 or 7 games would be just great for the game and fans of baseball. And, selfishly, I'd love to see the Yankees come out on top in 6. That's my prediction right now. That's where I'm at. But seeing Aaron Judge and Shohei Ohtani, just those two marquee names, kind of show up on the big stage. Ohtani obviously has been a guy who's been really delivering as of late. Judge has been infamously not as effective in the postseason as he is in the regular season. Well, he has a couple of games to change that script and change that narrative. But I really am just hoping to see a good competitive series, and one that if the Yankees don't win it, is competitive on that end as well. But again, it's as someone that's a baseball fan and there doesn't have too many, big baseball friends around me. I just want to make sure it just brings more attention to the sport. You see them talk about it on, the first takes and the ESPNs and those kinds of shows, seeing that kind of come to the forefront. Whereas a year ago, I don't think that really was a conversation with the D-backs and Rangers, but hoping to see the Yankees in 6, Jason.
Yeah, if I could write one, I mean, I'm always for more games. I know that's more stressful. If it went 7, that'd be awesome. But being that it would be in LA, so I think if I'm writing the script, Frankie, and hopefully you'd accept this one, a walk-off by Judge in Game 5 to end it.
To end
That'd
the
be my
World
script.
Series, that would be
Yes.
honestly the legacy. Talk about legacy. Put them in Monument Park right away.
There you go. Well, the Kings have a legacy they're trying to build on this year. The 39 previous years, there hasn't been enough winning. We all know that. But, Frankie, there's genuine excitement. And I'm going to ask you how you feel about the year coming in, because generally I would say I'm more of an optimistic fan. I could see the positives. There's certainly some negatives, some roster flaws. But I was really excited going into this season. And generally the preseason doesn't dampen that much, but it kind of did for me a little bit. I'm not down on the team, but I was so high in what I thought they could be, and I did not love the way they played in the preseason. Now that's all going to be forgotten, I hope, by Thursday. But did any of that preseason bother you, dampen any of your feeling on what you think this Kings team can be?
I mean, you never want to see a team go 0-5 in anything, even if the games don't technically matter. But there was something that really stuck out to me as far as a massive concern. I mean, the 3-point shooting to me, 22% over the course of the entire preseason. That doesn't seem like that's going to be something that holds true in the regular season for a Kings team that's really made a living, top 5 and made 3-pointers the past 2 seasons. But I do think, kind of looking at it from Mike Brown's perspective, you don't want to peel back the curtain too much. You don't want to show opponents too much of what you have. And that's something that Mike kind of alluded to while talking to the media last week. So am I concerned about the preseason? I mean, no, you never want to see a team go 0-5, but this team has so much talent, just so much talent. I think that it's going to be, I don't want to say easy, but it's going to be fluid once they get on the court and kind of start letting things roll here. But when you look at De'Aaron Fox, DeMar DeRozan, Domantas Sabonis, and down the line, Malik Monk, you have guys like Kevin Huerter and Trey Lyles who haven't played a second of preseason. They have the depth to make things happen, but you have to get healthy first and foremost. And the Kings didn't get off to a strong start in training camp in that regard. But you saw it in those first kind of opening minutes of preseason with Golden State in Sacramento, DeMar DeRozan going 6 for 6. Will he come out and do the same thing on Thursday night? I'm not sure. But the point is, seeing this offense with Mike Brown kind of going full tilt, saying, all right, let's roll out what we have here, our schemes, see what these guys really have in the set offense. I'm excited to see it. But no, I don't think the preseason you shouldn't hold too much weight in preseason, because they're not trying to showcase what they have, especially to opponents like the Clippers and the Warriors twice, who they have in their own division.
Of the concerns you do have then going into the year, where would they, you talked about that a little bit about, the 3-point shooting not being great in the preseason, but that's not phasing you at this point. What, when you look at the roster, the way it's constructed and just the way you think, what will be some of the trouble spots for the Kings this year?
I mean, we always look to the length, and right now they are entering the season with, I think, Trey Lyles. After trading McDaniels, they have Trey Lyles, Doug McDermott, not really a very strong front line behind Keegan Murray and DeMar DeRozan. And granted, I was talking with Matt and those guys the other day about how last year Harrison Barnes, was he the lockdown defender? Was he the Kings' most impactful defender? I wouldn't say so, but he's a big body. I think he was 6'8", 240, 235, a guy that can kind of go against those. We're going to see Julius Randle on Thursday night, or the Zion Williamsons. Is Keegan Murray ready to match up against those sizable forwards? That's something I'm going to kind of look for, early. Is Mike Brown going to call on Trey Lyles early on in situations where the defense is being exposed? Could we see potentially a Domantas Sabonis, Alex Len lineup at some point? I mean, Orlando Robinson's a guy I think that we could see play a little bit. He's athletic and he has some length, but is that going to be something Mike Brown wants to do? Roll with a 2-big lineup? It just kind of, the concern is always the Kings could use more length and more defensive versatility. I know I've heard Dave talk about that a lot on this show, and he's very concerned about it. But I think the Kings are kind of just doing what they've been doing the past couple of years, which is kind of trying to overemphasize or add more to a strength, which is their offense. And having DeMar go ahead, Jason.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was adding DeMar DeRozan, a 24-point per game scorer, and one of the best scores that the game has seen in a very long time. Adding that instead of an impact defender, I think it's just kind of Monty McNair in the front office trusting that this offense is going to be where they were in 2022, 23, which is hopefully outscoring every opponent, scoring 120 plus points a night, and good things happen when that takes place. But the defense is going to be a concern as always.
Yeah, I think, there's lots of different ways to build a team. I mean, we look at Indiana got through basically last year because they were so spectacular offensively. I think at the end, to really be champs, you got to be a better defense, better than average for sure. And the Kings are working on that. Let's talk about that end of the floor, Frankie. I think one of my beliefs is just the continuity of having so many of the same players back. I think it's bound to help you a little bit in the communication, in the reps, and the things you've been through. But where do you think they can be as a defense for the totality of the year?
I mean, it's all going to depend on your backcourt. I mean, De'Aaron Fox and Keon Ellis, that's a good duo to have. De'Aaron Fox leading the NBA in steals and steals per game last year. Keon Ellis has kind of shown he can be that. You see a lot of competitive teams or teams that are in the mix every year in the finals or going to the deep in the playoffs. They have that guy who can kind of be a stopgap on defense. And Keon Ellis is someone that kind of fits that mold. Chris Watkins and I were talking about the Matisse Thybulle fascination the Kings had for years, where they were always kind of knocking on the door of Philadelphia and even Portland, kind of see if he was available. Keon Ellis is somebody that I think can provide that defensive intensity, whether it's deflecting passes or on-ball defense, but he can also knock down the three ball. So you're not just getting a guy that's going to be, a total negative on the offensive end, but having De'Aaron Fox and Keon Ellis kind of be the head of the snake and kind of stop, those offenses from getting into the paint. That's going to be huge because we know Domantas Sabonis is not a bona fide shot blocker. I think he's somebody that gets a lot of flack for his defense and someone that I think was better last year than the year prior, but still not someone that you can go and trust to be a true rim protector. So I'm looking at how the guards are going to hold down the fort this year. And, Keegan Murray kind of factors into that as well. He can defend positions 1 through 4. This is his third NBA season. He has some experience guarding some of the best players in the league. We saw how he did against Stephen Curry last year. It wouldn't surprise me to see him open up Thursday on Anthony Edwards. That's pretty nice to have for someone that can guard, multiple positions. But, I think the guard spots are in a good spot, but, keeping things contained in, at the top of the key and before you get into the paint's where we could have some trouble.
What's the latest? You mentioned, we obviously didn't see Lyles or Herder. Herder coming back from the long form injury, the surgery and all that, and Lyles getting hurt in the offseason right before camp started. What is the status of those guys?
Yeah, we're going to head out to practice today around 12:30, and we should hopefully get an update on those guys. It's been a while since we've seen them in action at practice and whatnot. I think they had a Halloween party over the weekend, which looked pretty fun. Doug McDermott dressing up as Kevin Herder. But the last week we heard, Kevin Herder was cleared for full court activities and is participating in practice. He coming back from a pretty serious injury, the torn labrum and dislocated shoulder, something that also rookie guard Devin Carter is rehabbing. But Herder's mentioned that his shoulder's still not all the way where it was before of a strength. You wonder if that'll factor into the decision to play him opening night. But I do think that the fact that he's participating in practices and has had a full week to kind of get those under his belt could bode well for him. Trey Lyles also was ramping up. There was some guys, some friends of ours in media that were out there saying that he was going through some on-court, pretty intense workouts last week. We'll get out there and see if, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, is that enough to get you ready and get the reps you need to be prepared for the season opener. But having those two guys on or out of action was another reason why I'm not looking at the preseason too heavily, especially when you kind of factor in Jordan McLaughlin, the Kings' backup point guard, also was out. There was the first 2 preseason games, the Kings had no bench. They had none of their guys that are going to be in the second unit come opening night. So having McLaughlin back, having Kevin Herder or Trey Lyles in the fold, that could be big for them. But we'll get an update today, hopefully, and stay tuned. Check out SactownSports.com, obviously, or my colleague Brendan Nunez and my accounts on Twitter, and should have an update for you guys, hopefully around 12:30, 1 o'clock.
The decision for the starting 2 guard is made easier for Mike Brown. We know he obviously has had an affinity for leaving Malik on the bench, or putting him on the bench and bringing him off the bench, I should say. And so it kind of was going to be a Herder, to me, Frankie, versus Keon Ellis conversation, but Herder wasn't cleared for so late. So, and Keon's played well. Like he's shown that he can be a consistent, low volume 3-point shooter efficiently there and a good defender. If all things were right this offseason, everybody was healthy, how do you think that plays out? Same way or different?
It's Mike Brown to me. And, I think if you ask anyone that covers the team or even watches the team and listens to what Mike says and kind of to decipher. I think that Mike Brown really does like that idea of having Kevin Huerter in that starting lineup. And I think Keon Ellis will be the starter come Thursday. That could be because, Mike wants to see how it works with having Keon in that starting group. And more so, I think because Kevin's is not really ready to kind of take on that full workload. But I think the signing of Doug McDermott kind of makes it repetitive, having two, action heavy spot up or, dribble handoff shooters and Doug McDermott and Kevin Huerter, who both kind of fit the similar mold there as far as a guy that Domantas Sabonis really has experience with both of them. Doug McDermott played with Sabonis in Indiana. Kevin Huerter mentioned how Doug McDermott, told him when he came to Sacramento, when Kevin Huerter came to Sacramento, how much he was going to love playing with Sabonis in those kinds of offenses. But I think having Kevin Huerter in that starting five, sliding Keon Ellis back into a bench role at that point, kind of makes a little more sense to me from a defensive perspective, because now you have Malik Monk, you have Keon Ellis, you have Doug McDermott, you have Trey Lyles, Alex Len. That to me kind of solidifies the bench a little bit more than going Monk, Huerter, Lyles, McDermott. It's very offense heavy, not as much defense, but at the same time, Keon Ellis was really working for the Kings in a starting role. And I do think that he's earned that right to open the season as a starting two guard. I think that the 3-and-D aspect he brings could make him still a more impactful player than Kevin Huerter, because we did see time and time again last year. And it's not all Kevin Huerter's fault, but teams would seek him on switches often. And that's something that he was working on with the coaching staff, with Doug Christie, something that I'm sure he's working on in the offseason, having him not be such a target for opposing defenses where guys are having to switch and miss their rotations. But I think that having Keon in that starting role kind of does add another element of versatility to a lineup that, like we mentioned, doesn't have too many defensive, stalwarts. I mean, De'Aaron Fox led the league in steals. Keegan Murray, like we said, defensive 1 through 4, but these aren't guys that are all defensive first or second team players. These are guys that are holding their own at their positions. And Keon Ellis is someone that maybe possesses the best defensive potential out of those three.
Why, in your mind, Frankie, and it's not like it's broken, it's not a bad choice, I would say, but why do you think Coach Brown's so adverse to starting Monk?
People, it's an interesting conversation, because Brendan and I alone have been putting out, here the Kings are probably going to start Keon, and people are screaming for Malik Monk to start. And, it depends on how you view it doesn't matter how you start. It matters how you finish, conversation. And I think Mike Brown is someone who truly cares more about who's on the floor at the end of games. And I know that the Kings have started off poorly, and having Malik Monk out there next to De'Aaron Fox, that to me is their most effective backcourt. You want to have that for a majority of the game. But at the same time, you have to have balance, and you can't have that significant of a drop off going from a Fox Monk backcourt to Jordan McLaughlin and Kevin Huerter. I mean, and sure, you can stagger them and have them come on at different times, but I do think a large reason why the Kings have been so successful for the past 2 seasons is because of Malik Monk, and because you do have De'Aaron Fox, who's a volume scorer and a playmaker. You get to go right from De'Aaron Fox into Malik Monk. And then at the end of games, you have those players playing off each other who, they've been doing it since Kentucky, obviously. That's a huge, advantage for the Kings. And not many teams in the NBA have that, a guy that's a go-to scorer and a go-to option for the offense. So I know that when Malik signed, he was pretty vocal about if he thinks that a change needs to happen, he'll speak up. And I think to that point, he means he gets that this formula, the way that this Kings team is constructed, it's best for him to come off the bench right now. But if the Kings are struggling in November, December, January, if they've lost 4 or 5, they're hovering around the plan, he might speak up and say, hey, like, this isn't working anymore. We probably should switch things up. And to his credit, at that point, I would agree. If the Kings are in a position where they're not winning basketball games and they're fully healthy, I think you need to look at, what things need to change. And that's one thing that Mike Brown kind of had. Maybe it's call it an ace up his sleeve, call it something that, may or may never happen. But I think it's a luxury to have a player like Malik Monk off the bench. And Mike Brown always will point to, he's coached in San Antonio. He's coaching in Golden State. Manny Ginobili, one of the greatest 6 men of all time. And Andre Iguodala, who is, an integral piece of that Warriors dynasty. He mentions those two players a lot when he talks about Malik Monk. And the Kings have a long way to go before they become the San Antonio Spurs or Golden State Warriors. But those are the kind of players that you need in those positions to be a successful team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the conversation of I really don't care who starts. It's kind of who's on the floor more and who's on the floor in crunch time. But I guess my only beef I would have with this is I think last year Malik was 5th in minutes on the team, and he had a career year. He was awesome. And so to me, Barnes shouldn't have played more minutes. You could debate whether Keegan should, but like, I think when you start, you generally just get more minutes. It just kind of happens that way because you start, you come out, you at least come back in another time in that half. Whereas a bench player, a lot of times you come in and you kind of get the one run, and he's great in the one run. He gets to a half, but it's you always get 2.5 seemingly as a starter. And so if there's just a way that minute total can creep up, he doesn't have to start for me. I just think that total, he's too good of a player, too impactful to not be on the floor in probably the top 5 in minutes on this team.
Yeah, I agree. And that Mike, I think HB was kind of just, his vet, his guy, someone that he, really liked to put out there because of his people can grow, but the veteran leadership and what he brought, it really was maybe not valued to everybody outside of the team, but, in the locker room and internally, that was valued very highly. And like I mentioned, having his size out there is also, I think, a reason why Mike Brown would go there, because there really wasn't anyone else on the roster that could match that. But to your point, Jason, Malik Monk, I don't want to see any more 20, 21, 22 minute type of box scores here. Like, he needs to play near 30 minutes a game. And I think that this year, or maybe one of the, him re-signing with the Kings, I think would mean that's probably more likely than not going to happen, especially if Keon Ellis is a starter. And we'll see what happens with Kevin Huerter if he does end up getting back in the mix for the starting lineup, if he ends up being a backup 3, which probably is the spot he's going to be in, or him and Doug McDermott maybe playing positionless basketball 2-3. But Malik Monk, if the Kings are going to be truly successful, needs to play big minutes and needs to play next to his college buddy De'Aaron Fox in crunch time.
Well, we got an opener coming up 2 nights from tonight. T-Wolves will play tonight, so we can do a little scouting to see how Julius Randle and DiVincenzo look on their new team. But, Frankie, it's still Gobert, Ant-Man, Conley, a team that's gotten better defensively every season. McDaniels is a really good perimeter defender. Kings played him well last year too, but Naz Reid, Joe Ingles, you just go down the list. This is a team that was threatening for the 1 seed last year. That's a pretty tough opener come Thursday night.
Tough opener, but I know they're in Sacramento, where Minnesota's had the Kings number a little bit, but the fact that the Kings last year walked in the Target Center and took 2 games from Minnesota, I don't think anybody else in the league did that. It kind of shows the Kings last year matched up pretty well with them. And I think, Jaden McDaniels said after a game that, they would handle the Kings in a series, but I think it would have been an intriguing matchup if it would have happened. Now, different look this year. Rudy Gobert is going to be playing next to Julius Randle. Dante DiVincenzo, Kings legend, mind you. He is now going to be playing for Minnesota after hitting over 253s last year. He really kind of expanded his game with New York. It'll be intriguing to see how they match up tonight in LA. And I think, like you said, the Kings will have the advantage of being able to get a true scouting report on them. It won't be the first time that this team has been in action. But Anthony Edwards is really the player for me to watch. He has just torn apart the Kings. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think last year I wrote in a preview that I think he had been averaging nearly or over 30 points per game over his last 6 matchups against the Kings at that point. And that was the game he had to leave at halftime because he had the birth of his daughter. Pretty cool. They chronicled that in Starting 5 on Netflix, which is pretty fun to watch. But he's a Kings killer. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm intrigued to see who Mike Brown will roll out there as a defensive assignment on Thursday. I think Keegan Murray, to me, seems like the ideal person to put on him at the beginning, and he has experience defending him. But at the same time, Keon Ellis did a great job down the final stretch of the season last year. He guarded Stephen Curry in the play-in game. Someone who the Kings, I think, will lean on more for a lot of defensive assignments. But, Domantas Sabonis in the post, I think, has really fared well against Rudy Gobert in his career so far, and last year, especially in Minnesota. So it's a matchup that kind of has a high-powered offense against a very high-powered defense, and the best defense in the league last year. So a strong test from day one, whereas overall the Kings' opening schedule, it really isn't and it's on paper. These are games. You don't know what's going to happen until they're played. But from a strength of schedule standpoint, the opening week and a half, not as brutal as it was in recent years, but opening the year with a 1-0 record against a team that maybe will take the 1 seed in the West, I think that's going to be pretty important to get off on the right note. But the most important thing is it's at home. You always feel good about the Kings at home on their home floor with a packed house, and from everything I'm gathering, it's going to be a fun atmosphere on Thursday night in Sacramento.
Oh, for sure. And I know tonight, we told everybody about this earlier in the show, Knights of the Round Table. We're going to have that tonight. Oh, let's say the Knights of the Round Table.
Knights of the Round Table.
We're going to have that tonight where all of our hosts, I'll be out there with Styles and Watkins, the Drive guys, you, Brennan, we're all going to be there on YouTube starting at 5 o'clock. That'll be fun to be talking Kings collectively and see what we all come up with tonight.
It'll be a lot of fun to get everybody in one room. That's never happened before. I mean, we've all been here for a while. Never happened. Probably a little chaotic. I'm sure a lot of, friendly insults will be thrown my way, whether I'm on or off camera, whether it's pizza guy or now I'm getting the Costco thing. Yeah, Jason, we always stick together. It's because of this right here. It's because of this NY. That's why we stick together.
We bring the boom. That's what we do.
Yeah, it's good to be back. Good to be back, guys. Really excited to be back.
Well, Frankie, it's going to be great to have you back. You and Brennan doing your great work all along. You guys never really went away because the King season just doesn't stop. But I know you guys are glad the games are here, practices are here, the stuff to really talk about. We look forward to talking to you each and every week as well back here on the show. Thank you. Have fun with the season, and we'll see you later tonight.
Yeah, see you guys later tonight, and go Yanks, Jason.
Go Yankees.
We bring the boom. That's what we do.
Just never stops. All right, that's Frankie Cartoscelli.